Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's department budget hearing. Today is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. We have two presentations tonight, Department of Public Works and Capital Improvement Projects. I am Councilman Amilcar Hernandez. I am Chair of the Operations, Management, Budget, and Government Accountability Committee. This meeting is broadcasting live on HPA-TV's Xfinity Government Channel 96 and Frontier Government Channel 6032. It will also be streamed via hpa-tv.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku TV apps. It will also be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues present here today, starting from my right, Councilwoman Bilodeau, Assistant Majority Leader Clark, Majority Leader Rossetti, Council President Surgeon, Councilman Mitchum, and Councilman Thomas. Tonight's first presentation will be the Department of Public Works. I would like to introduce to you Director of Public Works, Chris Hayes. And Chris Hayes, when we open the floor, please introduce the leadership team that's here with you today. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilman. Patrol Mailer is here with me. She is our Deputy Director of Public Works. So we can move on with the slides. We certainly appreciate being here tonight to talk more about the department, the year that we're currently in, fiscal year 24, and fiscal year 25, the year ahead. It's been a very good year for the Public Works team. I came in January. I'd like to, at this point, publicly thank Director Looney, who is my predecessor and who did a phenomenal job with the department up until his departure at the end of December. He, as I said in my confirmation hearing, was quite helpful throughout the transition process and allowed me to start with a bit of an advantage, having met with division heads and him to best understand the department so we could have a smooth transition. Next slide. I'm not going to read the mission of Public Works. What I will say is it is a 24/7, 365 operation. And I think what makes us different, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, than other departments, is we touch every employee and every resident in the city, whether it's maintaining of city facilities or waste and sanitation. We are always involved, sometimes on a daily basis, and I believe that frontline aspect of our department makes us a little different and special, because we truly do answer to the residents on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So just to go over the department organization's chart, on the right-hand side we have our budgeted employee numbers, starting at administration and working its way down to BRT, which stands for the Blight Remediation Team. But I think it's important to talk about all the different divisions and subdivisions that our team is comprised of. You know, that's streets, that's waste and recycling. Within waste and recycling, we need to include the transfer station in that, the parks division, the blight remediation team, forestry, fleet. Our fleet division handles all vehicles except for the fire vehicles in all of the city. Golf, cemeteries, engineering, traffic, flood control, and by this we mean flood control when it comes to the Connecticut River and the Park River. Permits, both road work and evictions, as well as architecture and capital projects, GIS, and we also have our own fiscal management team, and we oversee all the facilities in our facilities division. So altogether, you're looking at 234 employees. One of the final slides will go through demographics. So as we look to 2024, I want to try to keep this high level. I don't want to get too far in the weeds because there's so many different parts of the department that I want to try to cover. So under facilities, I write here time-sensitive and emergency repairs. Our facilities team ends up being 24/7, even though we only have a first shift team. We have call-ins throughout the night and in the early morning. Anytime a city light pole comes down because of a motor vehicle accident, our electricians out of our facilities team have to respond. Any city building that requires an emergency repair or has an alarm go off in the middle of the night, that all falls under our facilities team. Our facilities team also secures any acquired buildings by DDS. Anytime we have a building that needs to be boarded up, that falls under the work of DDS. All of the firehouses, that falls under facilities. All of our firehouses are now maintained by the facilities division, as well as the Hartford Public Safety Complex. When it comes to 311 tickets this year, as of today, we have completed 2,965 tickets or requests for repairs, and we expect the year to end somewhere around 3,600. And we also handle all daily maintenance and operations for all of our buildings. So whether that's making sure our fire suppression systems are up to code and properly inspected, to an office needing new paint or a small renovation, that all operates through our facilities division. Under engineering and architecture, I again am going to take a very broad scope here because I know we're talking CIP in the next section of this meeting, so I'm not going to go into detail into the projects and successes because I believe that will be discussed there. But I did want to highlight our citywide paving for this summer is going to be a budget of $2.6 million, which is roughly $1 million over what we did last year. When it comes to our Department of Justice required citywide ADA improvements, as of this year, we've completed all of the facility improvements in any of the city buildings that were required under that consent decree. And we continue to work on sidewalk ramps. That is a much larger scale program that is going to take a number of years. When it comes to park and golf projects and flood control upgrades, I'm going to leave those for the CIP discussion where they will talk about those in more detail. And I did want to briefly touch on street flooding and climate resiliency projects. You know, we're making an effort to partner with the MDC where we can to work on street flooding. Something that we're doing now that you would not have seen the department do 5 years ago is we're designing 2 roundabouts on New Britain Avenue, one at White Street and one at Stone. We have partnered with the MDC and they are putting the dollars forward to help us design the drainage system that needs to allow for a separated sewer line in the area between these 2 projects. So we can now work with them to tear the road up once and have a completed project instead of have the hopscotch effect that we've seemed to do throughout the city in years past. The Blue Hills flooding study is near completion. We expect that to be completed prior to the end of fiscal '24. And we're also looking to partner with the MDC around the flooding in and around Stowe Village and Star Hardware. There were federal dollars obtained by Senator Murphy and Senator Blumenthal that we're now speaking with the MDC about how to best leverage those dollars to get the most impact for that neighborhood. Under our traffic division, when we speak of traffic signal replacements, upgrades, and optimizations, we are working currently on creating a new baseline of programming for 100 intersections. These intersections are integrated and they're smart intersections, and part of getting the optimization through timing is now working with the current traffic flows. We had pre-COVID traffic levels, then we went to COVID traffic levels. Now we're in this new era of post-COVID, if you will, traffic levels, and that is a major effort being done by our traffic division, getting those programmed properly to allow flow through the city as smooth as possible. Motor vehicle accidents continue to plague our traffic division when it comes to repair and replacement. We have 3 signals that have received significant damage this year that I know many of you are aware of. Annucello and Church came down during a snowstorm. That intersection, as well as Market Street and the Market Street extension, and Westland and Main, all 3 of those are in design for appropriate new signal structures and signaling programming. Westland and Main, a temporary set of poles just went up, wood poles, to keep that intersection moving. However, we expect that we will have to do a full redesign and look at the changing the placement of those poles because they have been struck by motor vehicles multiple times. So all of those traffic signal damage projects that I just mentioned are all in design. When it comes to traffic calming, 2024 has allowed us to do a fairly large pilot in Blue Hills that is affecting many areas, but especially Palm and Lime. We just completed a demo at Hillside, demonstrating some of our new traffic calming technology. And we have 30 traffic calming projects in design. Those are all being worked with currently with the Hartford Fire Department as we check turning radiuses and get to better tweak these calming projects. I would also note here that we're very proud to say that both Wethersfield and West Hartford have come to the city of Hartford to see how we're doing traffic calming to properly implement it in their towns. We are ahead of the suburbs around us when it comes to our traffic calming projects. As we move to our streets division, enhanced pothole patching has been a focus this year. To date, in this pothole patching season, we have patched 2,411 potholes, and in 2023, we were able to patch 3,815. Street sweeping, we have 3 street sweepers that are following trash routes daily. High volume intersections and major thoroughfares are being swept during 3rd shift. That sweeping cannot always happen in the winter. We need to be above freezing to be able to do that work. So that includes those high traffic areas overnight. We can't do our night sweeping unless temperatures are above freezing. From a catch basin cleaning standpoint, I would just like to note that our street division has added a daily catch basin cleaning crew. This crew, again, works within the trash district of the day to check on all catch basins, and they record the basins they have cleaned. And when we clean the top of a catch basin, it's not as simple as moving the debris out of the way, but it is bagged and disposed of properly so that that material doesn't end up back on top of the same catch basin. Lastly, from a street flooding standpoint, in fiscal year 24, we were able to mobilize our street team on multiple heavy rain events to be out active using loaders and hand tools to clear catch basins as they had problems to limit some of the flooding impacts that were seen throughout the city, as well as we now have a planned schedule when it comes to cleaning areas that get gummed up with, where our trash racks and our larger overflows exist. The fleet, again, which oversees everyone except the fire department, so far this year has completed 2,239 repairs. We're very proud of that number because that's on pace to last year. But we have had 2 to 3 individuals out on workers' comp throughout the season so far. And I would also like to note at this point, vehicle purchases, the VET line item for the 2025 budget is critical to our ability to continue to service the city appropriately. It is right now at $2.18 million, and that is the largest investment in our fleet that has happened in a number of years. Currently, our fleet is at a point where roughly 80% of it is over its useful life by municipal standards. For waste and recycling, the things that we wanted to touch on the most were the Rubicon expansion. Rubicon is the film and AI system that helps us properly route trash routes to be most efficient. They also allow us to note any anomalies, whether that be an illegal dumping or a home where a trash can was not put out on that given day. We're going to expand that to include our bulky waste program in fiscal year 24. That should be completed in June. We're excited to modernize that, and we're also bringing our solid waste inspectors onto Rubicon so that our whole waste division can properly communicate to get things cleaned up faster. Some bulky statistics for our bulky pickup that I thought were interesting of note. 5,972 bulky pickups have occurred citywide so far this year through the bulky pickup line and the 311 system. And lastly, our solid waste inspectors and our illegal dumping. Our solid waste inspectors, we have 4 of them in fiscal year 24, and we're proud to say that they have helped Hartford Police Department prosecute 3 illegal dump situations. The police department and DPW feels that a lot of our illegal dumps aren't done by one-off individuals, but repeat offenders. So we expect to see some of our instances of illegal dumps to drop down. Also, I'd like to note that we made an effort this year with residents and with property owners to work on education and try to solve many of the violations through conversation and through education instead of levying fines. As we move to parks, cemeteries, and golf, I would just note here that we have 42 parks and parklets. We have 4 cemeteries where we both have to maintain and operate burials. Our park, cemetery, and golf division also handles many street islands. They're critical in special events. They help during our leaf season, and they're the majority of our sidewalk clearing crew when it comes to snow events in the winter. So our parks division is incredibly important to the work that we do, and we feel that the parks continue to improve year over year when it comes to their maintenance. From a city field usage update, I'd just like to note that we are up to 15%. We're up 15% over last year for field usage. One of our largest users of city park fields is the Board of Education, their middle school and high school athletic programs. When it comes to golf, just a few things of note, that even that we're in the process of currently working on the cart path project that should be completed by the end of 25. That's exciting for our golf courses because it will allow the course to operate in less ideal weather. There were 50 days where the courses both had to be closed because of a lack of cart paths. So we expect the revenue to go up once those are complete. And currently, the irrigation project that's going on at Goodwin should reduce our water dependency on the MDC because we'll be using wells that are attached to our ponds, and we expect to see a decrease of up to $30,000 in water usage, and we expect this irrigation system to be online before end of fiscal year. From a forestry standpoint, the forestry staff update is in 2024. We were able to add another tree trimmer to give us a full team of 4, and we also have been able to hire a new city forester who has been on the job since April 8th and has been doing a phenomenal job. We also would like to note that in fiscal year 24, 392 trees have been planted at this time. From our 311 update and from our work tracker, We had 120 311 requests for tree issues. Those were all completed as of this date. And this year, we have pruned 353 trees and removed 149. Finally, the USDA grant for $6 million is being operated out of the Office of Sustainability. That's a large tree planting grant. I know they're in the process of getting that grant online so that we can use those funds in fiscal year 25 and beyond to help plant the city. From our flood control division, our system-wide improvement framework, our SWIFT plan continues to move forward with the help of the CIP. After fiscal year 25, we expect all of the major capital projects in this consent decree to be completed. All that will be left is updating the O&M manual, which is why I brought a prop. When you hear manual, I don't always think you think a book the size of the budget book. That is the size of our flood control manual. So that will be fully updated as the final step for our SWIFT decree. I would also like to note so far in fiscal year 2024, in the calendar year 2024, we have already had 6 flood stage events for our flood control system. By this point in the year, we would expect to have 1. So it's been a very wet winter, and our flood team has been very busy. Our flood control maintenance team is a team of 4 and 1 supervisor, and that includes a heavy mechanic. So it's a small but mighty crew that continues to keep the city safe. So that goes through all of the division updates. When we speak to strategic initiatives, I think the things that we're most focused on is trying to use technology to maximize and improve the quality of life issues that our residents face. The 2 ways we're really looking to do that as we move into fiscal year 25 is through the Rubicon system that I spoke about earlier, and through the Violytics system, which is a pothole, street depression, and street sign faded detection system that we're looking to put into our street sweepers and into our road inspector vehicles in 2025. That's currently in the budget. This is a system that as drivers drive, AI automatically detects these issues in the roadway. If it's a bad utility patch, we can link that utility patch to a particular utility to then hopefully get faster response. Currently, we only rely on our own inspections and the 311 system to be able to see what's going on in the streets. We expect this to be a big help moving forward. We'd like to continue to focus on interdivisional opportunities to move more quickly to address quality of life concerns. And by that, what I'm trying to say is we find that even our contractors who help out the city are not responding as quickly as we've seen in past years. So we're looking at how we can use elements of different divisions and the skill sets of our different labor forces to self-perform some projects, whether that be an improvement in a building or repairing a guardrail in a park, something so that we don't have to see projects go untouched for weeks or months at a time because a specialized contractor is not available. As I noted earlier, we continue to want to work with the MDC on stormwater issues as well as MS4 compliance. MS4, to be clear, is stormwater quality. It has nothing to do with the flooding. It just has to do with the quality of that flood water. And working with the MDC as they own and maintain all of our sewers below ground is critical that we have a strong partnership and we continue to try to move that forward. When it comes to the street sweeping program, we're looking to improve our routes, improve our signage, improve our neighborhood outreach. I know a pilot is ongoing in the West End of using new signs with QR codes, as well as putting up fresh new no parking signs and parking signs for areas on your trash day that you can park, and interactive maps. That's a project we've been working closely with the traffic division, the sanitation team, and the Hartford Parking Authority. We continue to focus on blight remediation, litter control, bulky waste, and illegal dumping. These are most important to me as a resident because we continue to have challenges about keeping our streets clean. So as we move forward, we're hoping that our Rubicon system will help us better communicate within the department to address these issues faster. We also want to continue to incorporate traffic calming, complete streets, and quality of life initiatives into all roadways, parks, and facility projects. We believe that traffic calming is going to continue to be a very important thing, not only in the city, but we're now seeing in the suburbs. So as these projects continue, wherever we can, we're trying to integrate creative ways to slow vehicles down and to make our city more livable. We continue to see having to come in after the fact is more expensive, so anywhere we can in our projects, especially when we're able to get the appropriate community outreach, that's the time we're looking to do these projects. I would also like to note here that traffic calming is not just speed humps. There are a number of different ways to help to slow down traffic or to bring traffic down to its appropriate speed. And the last initiative I'd like to speak to is we're looking to find ways to address line striping and street name signs throughout the city. That is something that's incredibly important to me. I know I spoke to it at my confirmation hearing. By the end of fiscal '24, the city will have its own epoxy-enabled line striper. So we will be able to start doing small projects in-house, stop bars that are missing at stop signs, chevrons that are missing on speed humps, and we'll be able to address some of those smaller issues quickly. We are still looking to have a comprehensive line striping program where we can rotate throughout the city, and our goal is by the end of '25 to truly have a path forward to make sure that we are continually maintaining the striping on our streets, as well as our street signs. If we move on to the budget comparison from '24 to '25, I would note the major increase is due to increases in union and non-union salaries. That's where the majority of that 4% comes from. It says there's the addition of one new principal engineer technician. My shorthand for that position is that's a road inspector that has been added to the 2025 budget, a position to go out and hold our utility companies accountable as they patch roads, and also to look at potholes and other dangers for our community so that we take care of them faster. The project manager that is listed here as another additional position is something that occurred in the middle of 2024. We took an architect position and split it into two project managers. So that is why it shows here an additional project manager, but that person is already hired and working within the city when we made that split earlier this year. And then the other rise in that 4% comes from the additional funding for stormwater quality contracted services. These are services to help us comply with the MS4 regulations of the DEEP and EPA. Budget highlight areas. I already spoke to the Violytics program. I believe that's going to be critical to our ability to improve our response time when it comes to pothole detection and repair, as well as holding our utility companies accountable. Couple that with the new principal engineering technician, that road inspector, and we hope to make a lot of progress in 2025. I already spoke to the VET allocation for the equipment at $2.18 million. That is, again, the largest investment into our fleet at DPW in a number of years, and is critical to us being able to perform the tasks that we have to go out and take care of every day. Again, I wanted to note the paving for 2025, or for FY25, around that 2.6 million. The MS4 compliance continues to be a major thing. And then finally, the SWIFT consent decree and getting our flood management control system to a passing grade. Lastly, we'll just speak briefly to the staff composition, where you'll see that 55% of our department is Hartford residents. From a race and ethnicity standpoint, 28% are Hispanic, 51% are African American or Black, 19% are white or Caucasian, and 2% are other. And from a gender perspective, we have 9% female, 91% male, and 0% that prefer not to say. And at this point, it is the end of my presentation. I appreciate you all for listening, and we welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Hayes. We're going to open up the floor for my council colleagues to ask some questions. We're going to try to do 2 rounds of questions. We're going to limit our first round to 1 or 2 questions, and then on the second round, we're going to ask some follow-up questions. I'm going to start from my right and see if any of my colleagues would like to kick this off with some questions. Councilwoman Bilodeau.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you to you and your team for your city service. My first question is, what is the project timeline for the roundabouts on New Britain Avenue?
I believe the project timeline will be discussed in the CIP presentation that is to follow. Is Frank here? Do you want to say anything to that at this time? Sure, please.
Good afternoon. Frank Delaripa, City Engineer. It's 2 phases. The first roundabout will be going out to bid this summer, and it'll take a solid year to construct. And we are designing the second roundabout, which will go out through advertising for construction next year. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Director Hayes, congratulations on your first budget presentation. Very thorough. Appreciate it. And you have a great team that's working with you. Can you speak to the spike in overtime in the Parks Division? What's some of the things that drove that cost?
Sure. Within the Parks Division, much of that occurred due to the addition of events throughout the season. As we got out of COVID, we saw a large spike in events. So that was a major part of that, and we're looking to track that differently in fiscal year 25. That was the largest single factor, as well as the department has grown in the past 2 to 3 years. 2 years ago, we had 24 maintainers in the Parks Division. We've gone up to about, I'll look for the number, but it's around 36 members, and that increase did not have an increase in overtime because we have more people to do the work. However, we have attempted to run the parks as a 7-day operation to make sure that we're cleaning up from weekend litter, making sure everything's getting mowed in a timely manner, and some of that has fallen into overtime. So this has been a time for us to adjust, and as me coming in, that was one of the items I saw when I first started at looking to make adjustments. So we did make some adjustments over the winter, and we are continuing to find a better way to go about the overtime allocation now in the spring.
Okay. My next question is regarding your staffing. Where are you short on staffing at right now?
Currently, our largest gaps are in our maintainer 2 class, and that is mostly due to attrition at this time. What we are doing as we move into the end of fiscal year '24 is that we're bringing in a new group of seasonal employees. Those are employees that are with us for a 3-month time frame. And at the end of those 3 months, our hope is that we will have a number of individuals who are trained and are performing well and enjoy working for the city, that we can then promote them. An M1 is a position that is temporary. It only lasts for a year while one is in their probationary period. When they leave their probationary period, they automatically become an M2. So we have a pipeline set up to do that.
So with that shortage of the M2s, does that drive any other costs in your other departments to compensate for that vacancy?
Absolutely, because our M2s slide between all divisions. It's that classification. So we see added costs in waste and recycling. We see added costs in parks, where the majority of our M2s are, and we also see it greatly in facilities.
Okay. So is there, I know we voted to reclassify some maintainer positions. Is there a need to reclassify all of them just to make it more easier to be promoted, or it's kind of status quo?
With the M2 situation, we believe that by going to the seasonal direction, that we'll have better success from the beginning and retain our M2s longer. It's the department's opinion that we want to see maintainers move up the maintainer scale. We have started to provide CDL training at DPW, and that's the major difference between an M2, a maintainer 2, and a maintainer 3. So as those vacancies occur in the M3 and M4 roles, we're trying to equip our staff so that they stay and work their way up the ranks instead of leave for other opportunities.
Okay. And going back to that flood study, when is the expected time for that to be completed?
Yep, before the end of the fiscal year.
And so what would be the next steps after that?
The next steps after that will be to see what the recommendations are, and then work with the MDC to secure funding and to find what projects would be most appropriate to put into design and then construction.
Okay. I have 2 more questions. Within this budget, is there any funding for the drainage of the Park River?
The drainage of the Park River?
Yeah.
That would, any of that funding would be in the CIP
Okay.
as a construction item.
Okay. I will ask the Superior Director regarding that. And also, too, I know you mentioned about funding for under vehicle equipment. Is there anything else that the department needs to be more efficient?
You're giving me a softball. If money was no object, what I would say is we would love to see our staff be compensated at a rate equal to or above our surrounding towns. Currently, our staff are the lowest paid amongst the surrounding towns, and we do act in many ways as a brain drain, where we'll have people start in our department, get their experience, and then leave for better paying jobs in better towns. So that is, I think, the most important. But when we're speaking to projects and things we can tackle in the short term, I think within our traffic calming or traffic engineering division, street signs, having a comprehensive street sign and street lining program would be most beneficial to the residents here in the city.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Majority Leader Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, good job. Nice to see everybody. I have a variety of questions, but I'm going to ask two. The first one is not a question because I think it'll take too long. I know, TJ. And I love my colleagues. I want to understand Rubicon more, but I don't want to do it here. So is there a way we can
Of course.
offline? Okay. couple of things that you spoke to that I want to talk about. When we talked about working with MDC, you know, storm water issues, it brings up to me something that I think the former administration was working on, but I'm not sure. And MDC is one of the culprits, but the other utility companies are also. You spoke to that we have a paving plan for the year, but what is the plan for us to have some type of coordination with utilities? So you have a paving plan. We're gonna pave streets across the city, and I guarantee you the next day, one of them is gonna come and dig up a perfectly well-paved street and put back a piece of crap. So, number one, how do we continue to hold them accountable to not put crap back? And how do we, at least in some way, coordinate with them?
So I'm going to start with the coordination piece.
Okay.
From a coordinating standpoint, we do. We sit down with every single utility, whether it's fiber, whether it's the MDC, whether it's Eversource, CNG, and we bring them the streets that we feel are in the worst condition in the city. And we say, these are the streets we would love to pave if we could pave everything on our list. Where are you doing work within the next 2 years? And they will go through and tick off any street that they say they have an upcoming project. And we take those off the list for the year, knowing that they will be dug up. Then we come up with our final list, which is in the process of occurring now, and then we schedule, which is coming up, I believe, next week, a paving meeting where we again meet with all the stakeholders to make sure that nothing has changed since we spoke back in January, to make sure that all the projects are still the projects that were on their lists and that the particular streets are still available to be paved. And at that point, we move forward. So we do have that coordination on the back end. Anytime there's an emergency, all bets are off. A water line breaks, a gas line breaks, there's nothing we can do there. From holding the utilities accountable, we believe that this road inspector is critical to that. We do not have the staff to go out and check every patch. Now, at the end of once we've gone a year, the utilities are supposed to provide the city with a letter certifying the patch, saying that it is held up, it is to the road standards. And this is the final patch, not an emergency patch, not a winter patch, but the final patch after a year, that it's held up and it is the appropriate patch. And we have varying levels of success to get those letters from the utilities. Some send us a blanket letter, others send us a list of the places where they certified, but we never from any of the utilities receive a letter saying, here are the patches that we do not certify. So that is where we think this road inspector will be incredibly important.
To that point then, as residents who are there and see the inferior work that consistently happens, would there be a way for there to be some type of contact with this person so it can be quote-unquote reported?
Sure, and how we've done it to date is through the 311 system, and this individual would be linked into that 311 system to look at all of those issues. And I would also say, when we hold the utilities accountable, we have had so many issues with a particular utility company in the previous year that over the winter, DPW did not allow for normal work to be done. We said no permits for normal work to be done because your patches have been so bad in the good months. We don't even want to know what they possibly could look like in the winter. And I believe that did send a message this winter.
Excellent. One more question. No, that's two. One was a part of one. So, no, that was one, and this is two. So illegal dumping, and you spoke to, you know, how many were actually convicted. As someone who, you know, and everyone here is just appalled by the audacity or whatever of illegal dumping. What is it that it takes to actually convict, someone of illegal dumping?
Sure, I think that would be a better question for the police department.
Okay.
But what I will say is, in the convictions that we've seen, video or photographic evidence of the act has been critical.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council President Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One comment and two questions. I'm being very specific. Comment, thank you so very much. Your presentation was very much appreciated, and like to congratulate again that road inspector. That is really going to be needed to help, and hopefully the road inspector will also take a look at all the street signs, that are missing or needs to be replaced. And my last part of the comment is when you're doing, Madam Majority Leader, review of the new software, would like to be invited.
We'll make sure there's a full council invite.
Oh, she said she'll set up a meeting with you. Okay, that was a part of my comment.
I believe it would be a union violation, though, to have you drive one of the dump trucks, just so we measure our expectations.
Okay, Mike, your seasonal, you said you're going to be getting some seasonal employees. When will that start?
That is being set up by HR as we speak.
And are we advertising for it, or?
Yeah, we normally have, 75? We usually have 75 or more qualified applicants anytime we do a seasonal application process. Anyone who ends up on the cert list will be offered an interview. And so the interview process can take a few days.
Okay. My last question for right now is the blight remediation between, I know the DDS has a blight and remediation team also. Do you guys work together? How does that partnership work?
Yeah, we do work together. DDS will work with us to create what we call packets of information. Our side for our blight remediation team is we handle any of the bulky illegal dumps or cleanup of areas where unhoused have been relocated and now the area needs to be remediated. So any of the actual cleanup work, that's our end of blight and blight remediation. So those team members are going out and as either our solid waste inspectors or members of DDS note violations or issues when it comes to the point where it's a city-required cleanup. That's where that team comes in.
Got you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Mixon.
Thanks. Put yourself last. I always forget that, but that's very selfless, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks to the whole department. I might go more than two, because if I don't ask them now, I'm gonna ask them later. So, but not much more than two. A question about the golf courses. And I ask this always of your predecessor as well. What is the percentage of users that are city residents?
We'll have to get you that number. He didn't tell me that's a question that's always asked.
And are they profitable?
They are, in the sense that we have a innovation fund for our golf courses, so that we're not drawing from the operation, the operational budget. But they have yet to fully pay back the investment the city made previously to restore the courses.
Are they close? Because I remember having this conversation with your predecessor where when I had first come in, they were losing, the golf courses were losing money every year. And then there came a point, it might have been during the lockdown, because I guess folks, we had our golf courses open and other states had their golf courses closed, so folks were coming here where they were actually making money. So have they gone back now to not making money within the context of that fund?
I'll have to check the numbers and get back to you, but I will say that the golf fees have increased, and as they've increased, even if play has dropped, we have seen revenues higher than in years past, even with drop in play.
Okay.
And then we would also like to say that with the work that's going to be done this year on the cart paths and adding 50 more possible days of play on average, that we would expect them to even be bringing in higher levels of revenue.
Gotcha. Okay. Question on a totally different topic. You talked about traffic calming and how that's more than just speed bumps and humps and tables. And I think this is one I also asked of your predecessor. We have those bike lanes on Weathersfield Ave, and I know those are supposed to serve a traffic calming purpose as much as a bike purpose, in the sense, right, we narrow the roadways so people go slower, the cars are pushed out, the bike lane's on the inside. What I observe every time I'm there is that there is never a moment when some car has not done it right in terms of parking by the curb instead of in the pushed out lane. And there aren't really signs, right? There's stripes, but there's not like a clear sign I've seen in other cities where they have a sign that's sort of like got a little picture of a car and a little picture of a bike in a space, so you could kind of know for sure what you're supposed to do. Now, I know probably enforcement, which is not your bailiwick, is part of this, but I asked then, and I have asked before, would it be so much for us to have a bunch of signs that made clear, like give people the benefit of the doubt and assume that maybe if they saw a thing, they would follow the rules? I know that seems perhaps too optimistic, but I mean, shouldn't we do that first, right? Shouldn't we have like the most basic thing? Where are we in terms of having signs for the bike lanes on Weathersfield, and perhaps more bollards? That was the thing your predecessor talked about, making it so you can't go over there and park.
Sure. I don't think we're opposed to signs. I think what it comes down to from a DPW standpoint is our sign shop is 2 individuals. And so being able to maintain all of the traffic calming within the city and installing and maintaining all of the signs, road signs within the city are certainly an incredible challenge. I am sure that this is something that's being considered on new projects that we can have during construction, that signage added, but we'll go back to the traffic team and our traffic engineers and see if we can do that as well on Weathersfield.
Well, let me ask you a more general, because I mean, I bring that up not because I'm obsessed with that bike lane, although
Sure.
it may seem that way, but it sort of is a broader question of making sure we do all that stuff. Is 2 people in the sign shop, like, what would be ideal in terms of meeting the city's needs in that shop?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you at one point there were 6. This is back about 15 years ago. Philadelphia has 12 in their sign shop. Not to say that we're the size or breadth of Philadelphia, but 2 is a low number, and we've been looking at creative ways to adding additional positions. Those 2 positions are classified as painters because originally signs were painted. And we are looking at how we can either change the title or the description to make it clear what the job is today, so that we can get the number of people we need to better maintain our city's signage and traffic calming.
Gotcha. All right, well, that was on 2 topics, if not exactly 2 questions, so I'll pass to round, well, not, I'll pass to Councilman Thomas and then to round 2. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilman Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Hayes, really good job. Just wanted to say congratulations on a successful budget hearing. Whenever I have a budget in front of me and I see different lines, I just have questions about them sometimes.
Sure.
And one of the ones that says special event overtime.
That's why I brought a ruler.
Okay, gotcha. So I wanted to know what would be a special event that qualifies or might need DPW's assistance?
Sure. Any DPW's assistance is needed for any parade.
Got it, parades and stuff. So for those, wouldn't they be sometimes a little bit more regular, or it kind of just depends on coincides if someone's in like a overtime and needs overtime in that time?
We don't run any large amount of staff on weekends, and with most of the events during weekends, and our second shift is also incredibly thin. So usually we need to supplement with our normal Monday through Friday crew.
Got it. And then my other question was about meal allowance. And so does DPW do meal allowances for the staff? That's good.
That is during snow events or some other overtime scenarios where they get an allowance for food during extreme
Like
events.
for extremely, yeah, long periods of time. And then the last question was around, this is DPW parks, and it's recreational supplies and horticultural supplies. And so the recreational supplies has gone down over the last, few years, from 45,000 all the way down to 10,000 now. But the horticultural supplies has stayed steady at 20,000, which is good. I just wanted to know, if possible, or were we ever, looking to bring the horticultural supplies line down to reflect its on usage sometimes?
We have been looking at that, as we saw the recreation supplies weren't a line item that wasn't being used, and that's why it was brought down. We are short of at least one gardener, and so I think part of it historically has been if we were up at full strength with our gardeners, would
You
we
would
need
use-
these supplies? But we're also moving to a place where we're using beds with perennials, doing less annual work. I was told a story by a gardener that 20 years ago, we were growing all of our plants for all of our plant beds from seed over the winter, and that flower arrangements were brought to every mayoral and council press conference. So I think that's where we see a major shift. But we'll continue to look at that item for sure.
Of course. And that's all I have for questions.
Councilwoman Rosado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, how are you? Great presentation, very thorough, and have heard great feedback since you've been in DPW. So my first question is, what is the earliest time for rubbish pickup, and what is the latest pickup? Or is the city treated the same for all neighborhoods?
6:30 is the earliest time for rubbish pickup
Okay.
throughout the city. The latest can vary because we have had issues around equipment failure and around staffing levels through workers' comp. Oh, I misspoke, 7 a.m. 6:30 is when the no parking begins on the street. 7 a.m. is the earliest for pickup. So it has extended later than we would argue it should. We're pretty good at this point now of moving on to doing a second day as needed and running overtime to complete routes that aren't completed in the day prior.
Thank you. So I know these are contractual questions, but let's talk about how many mechanics does DPW have? And how many vacant positions do you have?
We have 15 positions. Of that, I believe 3 are currently vacant, but then we have another 3 who are on workers' comp due to injury.
Okay, so I have spoken with other municipalities, right? And in other municipalities, the mechanics get a stipend for their tools, right? So they buy the tools, and every year the municipality gives them a stipend between $500 and $1,000. And so my question is, has there ever been discussion for that to be included in the budget?
I do not believe so.
Okay. And then my last question is the mechanics, and I'll say this, when you go to a dealer and you get your car fixed, right? Light duty could be $150 an hour. When you work on heavy equipment, the hourly rate is $225 an hour. Are the mechanics here paid by the type of vehicle they work on, or are they all paid the same rate, no matter if you work on heavy equipment?
They're paid by their job classification, heavy versus light. We have heavy mechanics and light mechanics. They have different pay rates as well as different job classification or job requirements.
So you do have a line item for heavy equipment mechanics?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay,
Yeah, because
thank
we have a
you.
heavy garage, we have multiple heavy mechanics.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
a separate facility.
I'm all set, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Where do I start? No, I'm just kidding. Two questions. I could do round 1 and 2 together. No, I'm just kidding. So let's start with, actually, let me follow up a little bit on what Councilwoman Rossetti brought up regarding the inspector for the utilities. You know, I started that conversation with your predecessors and eventually with City Engineer De La Ripa, and then most recently with you, you know, about the 2 positions that we were hoping to get. We got 1 in the budget. That's major progress. But I wanted to make a statement that that's kind of like phase 1 of what the bigger issue is. The second part of that issue is the actual internal processing and acquiring the information and keeping track of all these patches, all these excavations. At least as of a couple of months ago, that was all pretty much manual. There was no software, no computer that kept up with all the different permits that were requested, the ones that were approved, where they were supposed to do the excavation, what's the timeline of when they're supposed to be done with that excavation, so the inspector could go and inspect it and give it like the okay, make sure that it's to the standards of DPW, which is what the ordinance says. So those pieces were still missing. So I want to make a statement that I encourage, you know, your department to kind of like take a look at that process to make sure that now that we do have somebody that could actually go out to do the inspection, that those processes are in place now to be able to catch those permits and make sure that no utility company does the job in 1 day, leaves, and then 6-7 days later, you know, which is harder now to get the utility company back to repair it, and then they're going to take their sweet time to then kind of like call their attention. And I understand that some excavations, you got to wait a few days, you know, to make sure that you know, they do like a temporary patch, and then they do, I don't know, I don't remember the terminology, but I know it's like a temporary patch, and then they go and do the real patch after X amount of days. But if we account for those days on that timeline, I just want to make sure that the system in place will handle that. Now my first question, repairs of vehicles. So my understanding is that we have spent quite a bit of money repairing vehicles that, you know, honestly should be out of service. 2012 vehicles, vehicles that are extremely old, vehicles that have already surpassed the life expectancy by more than 100%. Meaning that they not only met the life expectancy, but they have already almost doubled the life expectancy. But that has come at a cost of potentially having the vehicle idle for some time because the parts are no longer available with the regular vendors. It's more expensive now to repair vehicles that are that old. Can you talk to me a little bit about what is the vision as far as what DPW can control? Because I know that not all the vehicles are from DPW, as far as how we can mitigate that and kind of like keep working on try to decrease that expense.
Unfortunately, the most simple way to mitigate that expense is to spend more money on equipment and operate in the standard municipal cycle. And that standard municipal cycle is 8 to 10 years, with 40% of the purchase price of the vehicle spent in maintenance. At that point, the rule of thumb is that's when it's time for the vehicle to be retired and auctioned off. So when we're dealing with vehicles that are 20 years old and have their full purchase price in maintenance, the only next step is replacement. Unfortunately, at this time, a 6-wheel dump truck that plows Main Street and all of our neighborhoods, in 2006, that vehicle cost roughly $1,000. Today, we received an estimate that they're up to $260,000. And you're looking at a lead time that can be up to a year. a sidearm automated rubbish truck that has a compressed natural gas engine, brand new off the line, today would cost us $460,000, and that truck would not be in service here for 2 years, because we just found out there's a strike going on at the transmission factory that services the automated compressed natural gas rubbish trucks. So it will continue to be a problem. But we have an incredibly skilled team that is passionate about taking care of our fleet, and they will keep everything on the road and safe as long as possible.
Thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about grants. When I looked at the level of grants, the increase, although on the chart it shows that there was a decrease, the revised budget for 2024 had it revised at only $30 million for grants. Now you're recommending, the recommended budget says 24, almost 25 million. So it is an increase compared to the revised, not the adopted budget, but the revised budget. Looking at those grants, I found it very interesting that none of those grants covers any FTE, which is interesting. I mean, it does happen, but with so many grants that your department has, is that something, and I don't know if that's your question or a Julian question, but, you know, Julian is there, so might as well take advantage, right? None of these grants have the ability of covering any FTE whatsoever?
Can you hear me okay? The vast majority of the grants associated with the Public Works Department are capital improvement or capital project grants. Whether there are some out there that may allow some form of, allocating salary costs to, I'm not sure. I doubt it. And then there was a first part to your question, I think was just the year-to-year changes in the projections. So the original FY24 projections, which would have been put together, about a year ago, were, I would say, much more aggressive in sort of projecting the spend down of existing grants. And so what you see in the revised numbers and the numbers for FY25 are, show more of a paced spend down and, a paced, anticipated pace of, construction progress. And there's also two significant changes in those projections. One was for a large DEP grant for Batterson Park, which had initially been projected to be entirely spent down in the current year. And then there was some uncertainty about the direction that grant was going to go. So that's actually not reflected in the projections. It was about $9 million of the difference. But as I said before, a lot of it has to do with just sort of pacing our expended projections rather than sort of showing an entire grant spent down in 1 year.
So is there a lot of carryover of grants from last year to this year in the recommended budget?
Right. These are capital grants that are, typically take multiple years to spend down.
Yeah. All right, and last question, I know this will be my third question, so I'm going to ask this last question before we move on. So there's one particular grant that caught my attention, Maple Avenue Lights and Goodwin Entrance. There's $1 million there for that grant. Can you talk to me a little bit about that grant? Can you?
Sure, that's a streetscape improvement project to deal with sidewalks, lighting, curbing, and that project is in the process of going out to bid, or the bid has closed. We expect construction to begin in the fall.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see if we have questions on round two. Anybody on my right side have any questions? Yep. Councilwoman Bilodeau.
Just one question from me. So I know we've had quite a backlog in the past for mowing, landscaping maintenance for city-owned property. Is that attributable to staffing shortages or equipment failure or both? And is there any way to improve it, or do you have a plan to improve it going forward?
Sure, thank you. I believe this is something that we can look at in a couple different ways. We were able to bring online 5 new zero-turn mowers, 1 wing mower, and we have 2 more zero-turns coming for our Parks Department and our BRT, blight remediation team. So from an equipment side, we're better off today than we have been in recent years. When it comes to the city-owned properties, the mowing and maintaining of those city-owned properties are handled by our blight remediation team. That's about 172 properties. As you can see, there are only 14 people on the blight remediation team. And not only are they caring for or taking care of the 170 plus properties, but they also are the ones going out taking care of the illegal dumps and those blight packets we spoke of when we talked to the relationship between DDS and DPW. So there is more work than the team has complete capacity for, but we stay up with it. We're also in a better place now equipment-wise than we were a year ago, and we've added in a team leader, and we have 2 open positions that were added for that team as well.
Thank you very much. I do have one more question. And is there a plan this year for sidewalk repair, and what would that be?
Yes, sidewalk repair will continue. We're going to be utilizing the $1 million in sidewalk money that was allocated to go through and replace single panels. We have a contractor on board to begin that repair. We were waiting for the weather to be good enough to do permanent sidewalks.
Thanks so much.
Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the sidewalk question, if there happens to be a hole in a sidewalk, who bears that responsibility of fixing it?
I believe it would depend on who did the damage, but in general, the city would repair any sidewalk panels that have a danger or an imperfection.
Okay, I'll get you the address because it was something was made. I was made aware of that a few days ago. Also, too, street sweepers. How many do we have in the city?
We're running 3 regularly. We have 4 reliable, fully operational sweepers.
And how many vehicles are you looking to purchase?
I don't have the VET number in front of me, but it is at 2.18 million. I can do some quick math and get back to you, but it would be somewhere between 15 and 20 vehicles.
Could you just give me the breakdown of those vehicles, please? Not now. You don't have to do it
Yep,
now.
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. See, that wasn't bad, was it?
No, it's great.
Majority Leader Rossetti.
Thank you. In page 25-6 of the budget book, the whole waste recycling program, and maybe some of this will follow into Rubicon, which I don't understand yet, but, you know, when we talk about education and enforcement on recycling, and I think as a city, we're not as good at that, partly because it changes and it's hard to understand and how we do educate and enforce people. Is our poor performance tied to the percentage of state recyclable goal met at 10%, or is that not a correlation? And how do we, that's all one question, and how do we make it easier for people to understand the recycling program? Quite frankly, I find it confusing at times.
Mm-hmm. What that has to do with is the contaminated percentage. And I know that the 311 team and community outreach is coming up with a program and a scannable QR code that they're looking to put on to trash cans, everyone's trash and recycling cans, so they know exactly what they can put in and cannot put in. We've had many discussions at DPW about the need for early education. We were joking that People still don't know that you can't put a greasy pizza box in your recycling bin. So education does play a part in that. We are teaming up with the mayor's office to look at how to better educate staff. And I think that QR code will prove to be helpful.
Whatever we're doing now, I really don't think it's working. Great, a QR code is great, but that's not helping people. That's not, visuals, those kind of things. So I would love for us to see and what it would take to really make that an effort for the next year and how we could do that. And that's my statement question.
Council President Surgeon.
Well, I'll be the first one tonight to say thank you, Sir Chair, to make him feel happy. Hey, listen, we have a running joke when, we refer to our chair as Sir Chair. Yeah. My question is, your bids that you have out there, how many, does Public Works, the turnaround time in getting it through procurement, how is that working? And if you can give us a list of how many different contractors or subcontractors you have that does different work for the department.
Just to clarify, so on-call contractors
On-call.
or anyone who has done work?
Anyone that has a contract with the city, from, the list of people who, you said we only have one company that does sidewalks. People like that. So we'd like to get a list of all contractors that how many cities and, the amount, and how many Hartford business in comparison to out of Hartford business.
We can provide that list.
Yep.
And from a procurement standpoint, we do work closely with procurement. They are incredibly helpful when we have contracts that are underperforming, where we need to make adjustments. So they have been helpful to us. Our relationship is strong with our procurement team.
So your turnaround time, if you have to put a bid out there?
I'm only 4 months in, so I can't speak to if our turnaround time is normal or not, but we're getting, normally within a month, we can have something out on the street.
Okay. Because, knowing that this is an upcoming, season for construction, if you're putting out, RFP out there, to make sure, the work starts, as the weather change, I would like to know the turnaround time for you.
Absolutely, and I will say, I think since we added our 2 project managers from that old architecture position, that having 2 people who are dedicated to help shepherd projects through Public Works, that has really helped our process because we can keep them top of mind.
Great. Can you just have one last one? Okay. You mentioned in your presentation that you do about, I think it says about 49 buildings you maintain. Am I correct in my notes? Between buildings, cemetery.
It was parks, parklets, and cemeteries.
What's a parklet?
Parklets are small parks.
Oh, right. So we have 49 of those that you maintain?
Yes.
And you said there was an increase of about 15%?
Of field usage.
For field
Correct.
uses. And you said also that the Board of Education use a lot of our fields also?
To supplement what they can't do at their own facilities.
Okay, could we get a list of the fields they use? How does that work? Because, I mean, during the summertime, you know, we have, you know, the football and the soccer and the baseball. How is that interrelated?
Sure, they have preference only during the school year, during that school hour block. I believe it's 3:30 to 5:30, maybe 3 to 5:30. They have preference to reserve fields at that time as a partner with DPW. But the schools aren't using the fields over the summer or using them into the evenings at a first choice system. We have a tiered system within MyRec, the scheduling system. So BOE can go in for that early slot wherever they need it. Then tier 1 are, you know, Hartford youth leagues. And then we have Hartford adult leagues. And then the last tier are outside leagues. And the fee structure changes depending on the league.
And so we allowed them to use, you know, they get the first choice, the Board of Education.
In that limited time frame in the Monday through Friday.
Right, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Rosado?
Hi, I have a quick question. Who is so I'll give you an example. So one day they were paving on my street, right? And Representative Sanchez came over and said that the way they laid the paving down was incorrect. And so my question is, do we have city inspectors that actually go out after a company has paved and make sure that they put on the minimum required? I think it's 2 or 3 inches of paving down. And do we also have an inspector that goes out and checks that it was properly done? And my other question is, when we have our streets paved really nice, we all know that MDC might come in and do some work, and they have, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, 6 months to come and, as long as it's not winter time, to practically, you know, make that street look what it was again, right? Repave it. And that doesn't happen. And so I've had a lot of constituents reach out to me where they find themselves calling the MDC. Some of them are successful, others are not. What type of enforcement does the city have to go out and do this QA?
Sure. At this time, we have very limited resources to do any of the things that you described. That's why the road inspector that was discussed earlier is so important to us, so that we can begin the process of having staff to help hold the utilities accountable. When we are alerted to a problem, we work with the utility to rectify it, and what we have at our disposal is being able to pull their ability to do maintenance, their permits for maintenance within city roads. So that is the leverage that we possess. But this speaks to why having not just this one, but many other road inspectors are going to be critical to the improving conditions of our roads. I'll also note that the utilities, when they tear up a section, if they tear up a section of line striping, they're supposed to replace that as well.
Council President Surgeon.
I just told him I got one last question. MDC, the drainage. You know, they're always complaining that's one of the reasons why we have flooding, because those little, the gate things on the roads are not cleaned by us. So how often do you now are cleaning that drainage? So we won't hear back from them that we're not doing it.
Correct, and we've actually received compliments from them on the improvement.
Wow, awesome.
So we're very excited about that. We have a team of 2 to 3 that is out daily with following the trash routes, the trash area, and are handling any issues we find. And then prior to major storms, the MDC is also going out and alerting us to any catch basins that they feel need to be cleaned. And we are going and completing their lists with additional staff prior to the rain or snow event.
Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your comparison or what is it, page 8 of your presentation, just looking at this year's budget versus last, there's a dramatic drop in grants. Is that just that we had ARPA money before, or what is that $14 million lost about?
It's not so much a loss in grants, it's just a sort of an updated projection of spending down grants that the city has already been awarded. And so one of those is the Batterson Park grant, where the plans have been kind of in flux. And
So this is not like a sudden loss of expected money. This
Correct.
is just, okay, that makes sense.
And these are mostly capital projects.
Okay. On an entirely different, I'm just jumping around to the things I've left. You
That's the
talked
fun
about,
part about this department. There's a lot of different parts to it.
I'll take your word for it. You talked about, when you were answering a question about overtime, that sort of trying to move to a 7-day operating model for the parks, I think. But there's overtime. Is that, is the money there for that now? Or like, what does that look like to move to that? Or is the overtime being spent because you can't get there yet? Because spin that out for me, like, how do we get to the 7-day model?
Sure, overtime will always be a piece to that puzzle. We also are looking at staffing levels, and the 17-16 contract is up in this year, in January, so the negotiations will begin to happen with that. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But broadly speaking, we know that 7-day-a-week trash is required within the park systems in season, not obviously in the winter. And currently, we're getting closer, but to be able to mow everything that needs to be mowed and maintain the new ball fields and all the other aspects of our places our residents recreate, we're still at this time requiring that overtime.
I guess my question then is, what would it take budget-wise? Like, before you said if money were no object, and that's my favorite preface in all of this. I like to have you answer questions that way. So let me ask, if money were no object, like, what would it take to get to 7-day operation so that you weren't depending on overtime as much?
Sure, we can provide that to you. I want to give you a real number.
Fair enough. I like that. Also, you said that the place where you have the most vacancies is maintainer 2s. How many vacancies overall, and how many of those are maintainer 2s, if you know?
I have to go to a different list. That's it. There we go. Total number of vacancies is 18 positions at this time.
That's the whole department?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I guess this comes back a little to the 7-day operation question. I asked you at your confirmation hearing, actually, I think, about the idea of having more, something like park rangers. In other words, sort of more people who are visible, who are in the parks and public spaces, both to clean up and to be a resource to folks, make them feel safer using those facilities. And you said at the time, like, yes, that is interesting, would like to look into it. First, I guess, what classification would a park ranger type person be? Would they be a maintainer too?
I do not believe so. Because it would be a new position, I think it's something that would need to be negotiated with the union and have its own job classification and own title.
Is that in the works potentially, given that the contract's coming up?
At this time, it is not. We can negotiate positions, whether we're negotiating a new contract or throughout the length of the contract, especially when you're adding positions and trying to make a larger department. But at this time, with the budget as it was presented and with the business cases only in those particular areas of MS4 and the road inspector And Violytics, we're not at this time looking at that.
Gotcha. In terms of illegal dumping, you talked about having some system that was, I don't know if this was Rubicon or some other system that's on the street sweepers that sees when street signs are missing or there's potholes. Does that also see when there's dumping, like when there's a pile of garbage in a spot?
It doesn't, but what it is a Rubicon, it would be on the street sweepers, but what it does do is there's a button that attaches to the steering wheel, and if the driver notes something unusual that the computer system is not registering, they can press the button, a microphone will turn on, and they can say illegal
pile of
dump,
garbage, or
mattress, whatever, and there will be a GPS location attached to that press.
And that functionality, I think you said this right, is that coming or do we have it?
It is in the FY25,
So coming
Budget.
soon.
my hope.
And I guess my last question is concerning bulky pickups. You gave us a number, 5,972 this year, but can you put that in context for me? Like, how does that compare to last year?
We can provide that number to the council. Having not been here last year, making sure that my numbers make sense with previous year's numbers, I just want to make sure we're consistent.
Do you have a sense, and if you don't, that's fine, you can get back to me. Do you have a sense if it's improving? Like, well, let me put it this way, because improving is sort of a difficult question to answer. It has always seemed to me like a lot of folks don't know about the bulky pickup rules, and stuff just sits for a while because people don't know and they sort of put it out and then don't worry about it. Do you have a sense that the various efforts at education and other things are making it so that that happens less, so that more stuff gets picked up and less stuff sits, or is that problem continuing?
We see improvement, especially now that we're up to, and have been up to 4 solid waste inspectors. A lot of, now, because 5 years ago we had 1. So the fact that now the city is in 4 quadrants, we're able to more quickly be able to start to engage with residents or property owners on those rules. And we do continue to see that being improving. I would also just note, and I don't believe that you're insinuating this, but bulky pickup is to your point, the legal call it in, we send the truck to pick it up. It does not include illegal dumps.
Right, yeah, we're on the same page as far as what I was asking. Is, how would you measure that question, and how do you measure that you're improving in terms of getting residents to call it in and not just leave the stuff sitting there? Like, how do you know?
It would come down to violations recorded and trips out to particular properties.
And right now, because I know you said you were trying to have, not issue as many citations and just get people to do the thing. When the inspectors see that there's a bulky thing sitting there, do they go and knock on the door? Do they leave a note?
Both.
And then at some point, if there's no reply, then do they issue a fine?
They issue a letter, and then there is the opportunity for a fine that can be appealed. But normally the knock or the letter at the door will spur communication.
What happens in the interim to the bulky thing?
It stays in place, because not always is it a violation where it's as simple as just they call it in for a pickup. You know, if it's a large apartment complex and is greater than 6 units, it no longer follows the bulky rules because they aren't using city trash pickup.
So then it's sort of like illegal dumping in the sense that they have to hire somebody to get it.
Correct.
I'm not going to ask any more questions about that. I have questions that are not budget questions that I'll ask you later about the
Absolutely.
process. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. I'm going to ask kind of 1.5 questions. Allow my colleague, Councilman Gale, to prepare 1 question, maybe. Can you provide us the list of all the sidewalks that you will be doing with that $1 million that was allocated from last year? At any time, whenever you have that list, to provide it to council, or what are the specific locations where there will be work to be done with that specific money?
Yes.
Thank you. And then, I know you brought your ruler, so I'm going to put it to use. There is a line, the Division of Equipment Services. It's not on the budget, there you go, on that one. The Equipment Services, on page 31, towards the top. If we look at 2021, 2022, 2023, and even this year. So on 2021, for that particular division, the actual versus the budget was 80,000 more. So we spent 80,000 more on that.
Can you repeat what line? I'm sorry.
Equipment Services, that's line 1,238. So that's the whole division in bold. For 2021, there was about $80,000 overspent for that division, which is reasonable. It's not a big number. Then the next year, the spending over budget was $130,000. Then the following year, 2023, the spending over budget was $300,000. Then 2024, if the first 6 months of the year, if the trend of the expenses are similar for the next 6 months, the projection will be that we will be $435,000 over expenses over the budget for that particular division. Yet, the recommended budget stayed basically pretty much flat. It only increased by $15,000, which was all in salaries, and none of the other lines were touched at all. With almost now 4 years of historic tendency of spending for that particular department, is there any reason why this division doesn't get any increase to cover the expenses based on the historical data that we have?
Our department was informed that it was going to be a flat budget.
The motor vehicle repair that's within that division, because that's the area where I can see a little bit of that motor vehicle repair. Is that the same? Is that the same line that we've been talking about repairs of vehicles in general, or that falls? Is that the line? Line 1,255.
Yeah, I see the line here. Yes, I do believe so. I was just
Okay.
looking to see if that includes when we have to send vehicles out and the repairs are beyond our capability. But yes.
Okay. Okay, I think that the rest of of my questions regarding that, I'll ask for those at a later time. Councilman Gill, do you have any particular questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no particular questions. Let me apologize for missing your presentation. I unfortunately delayed at another meeting, but greatly appreciate you coming here, and I'll take my questions offline if I have any. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes this presentation for Department of Public Works. We will be taking just a quick recess. We're going to come back at 7:25, so a 9-minute recess, and then we will continue with the Capital Improvement Plan Division. Thank you. All right. Now we're moving on to our second department of the night. We have capital improvement projects, and we have with us Director Paul Drumey. Please introduce the leadership at the table with you tonight. Thank you.
Hi. Good evening, Councilman Hernandez and fellow council members. Thank you for your time this evening to discuss the fiscal year 2025 capital improvement planning budget. So with me tonight, a round of introductions. To my far left, I have Principal Planner Owen Deutsch. Next to him is Julia Jack, the City Architect. To my right, we have Julian Freund, the Director of Management, Budget, and Grants. And to the right of Julian, we have Corey Mills, the Performance Manager. And then at the end, we have Christopher Amaya, the CIP Budget Analyst. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so a few contents here that we'll be going over tonight. Introductions, which I just did. We'll get to definitions in a moment. The fiscal year 24 CIP updates, highlights, overviews of current projects, fiscal year 2025 recommended CIP budget, and a few bullet points underneath that, and then finally wrapping up with what's next. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is the capital improvement plan? 5-year plan. It's composed of 2 parts, capital budget and the capital program. Tonight we're going to be focused on the capital budget. So a little bit about the budget. It's a component adopted by council ensuing fiscal year, which outlines the budget expenditures on capital improvement projects. The program is the plan for which the capital expenditures that extend years 2 through 5 of the CIP. Next slide, please. Okay, what is a capital asset? So a capital asset can either be tangible or intangible, significant value of typically over $50,000, and the useful life that extends beyond 1 year. So an example of tangible are what we're presenting to you tonight. Facilities, our parks, our roads, our infrastructure are examples of tangible assets. An example of an intangible asset is a computer software. And for example, the Procore software that we're currently using to report to council and leadership. Okay. Let's slow down a little bit. We'll go back a slide. Yeah. So these are our 5 asset classes. 1, facilities, 2, infrastructure, parks, transportation and mobility, and followed by schools. With me tonight, to my left, Owen Deutsch is the asset class lead for transportation and mobility, and the city architect, Julia Jack, is the asset class lead for parks and facilities, and I am the asset class lead for schools. And Frank Della Ripa, the city engineer, is the asset class lead for infrastructure. Next slide, please. All right, so part of the process, meeting with planning and zoning, their involvement to make sure that we, as we present our projects, as the asset class leads, bring their projects to the director of capital projects, myself, and the team. We take those projects before planning and zoning. This year, we met with them on February 13th and then again on February 27th to make sure that these projects aligned with the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development, to which at the second meeting they did approve all the submissions, unanimously voted in favor of all the projects submitted. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with a few fiscal year 24 highlights, followed by an overview of the current projects. Next slide. And one more, Chris, thank you. All right, so the 2024 CIP highlights our accomplishments to date. Schools, right? We have a massive school construction program. Buckley and Burns schools are in construction. Thankfully, thanks to council and the reauthorization funding needed to support those schools, as well as our support up at the delegation and the state level as well. So in design and early implementer packages for Kennelly and Burns, or Betances, so the 60% design on Betances and Kennelly are underway, moving nicely toward 100% design development construction documents. And phase 1 of those 2 projects are the temporary classrooms that are on site. So because they're occupied as new projects, we need to have some swing space. And in order to do so, we'll have these temporary classrooms dropped on the parcels so we can start the first phase. We'll move a portion of that school out into the temporary classrooms and then start that portion of the school for renovation. Another highlight accomplishment to date is we're excited about the Asylum Hill Station engine number 5. Right now we're at 100% CDs and we're meeting actually tomorrow morning with the AHJs, the authorities having jurisdiction, to make sure that what they see, if they can offer anything before we do go out on the street for soliciting bids. Farmington Avenue Streetscape, the support from state funding, we put that out to bid, it was awarded, and now that project is in the submittal process, and we're looking to start construction in the next few months, so that's exciting. Continued areas of focus, limits of pay-go budget, which is one of the reasons the fiscal year 25 submission is modest, in school construction, traffic calming, always in flood control, and then operational efficiencies and streamlined reporting on capital projects. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so different from years past, we haven't presented to council what's currently in motion, and I felt it was important to present what we currently have in motion, whether it's early on in design, in construction, or on the tail end of construction, closer to closeout, just to show this council and the community at large, all the wonderful things that this city of Hartford is doing beyond this fiscal year 25 submission. So next slide, please. So the first is facilities. These projects here are in the executive summary that we started sending to council, which is the ProCourse system I mentioned earlier, the intangible asset, right? The software that we purchased and now we are using to report to leadership and council. So the facilities investment value is about $11 million. Next slide, infrastructure. Ongoing investments in our city for infrastructure total about $45 million. Next slide. And then the attention on all our city parks has been considerable, with current investments totaling roughly about $22 million. And this, I think, is important if we can stay on parks for a moment. There's a lot of great projects coming up, and this does not tell all of it. We are working on some funding we have not programmed yet, so there is some municipal outdoor funding that we are trying. Julia Jack, the city architect, myself, are trying to work with the park groups, and strategically program the money, the additional funding that you don't see here on this slide. Next slide, please. All right. So, transportation. So, the federal and the state support has given the city the ability to design and construct transformative infrastructure projects. The roundabouts and the roundabouts and Farmington Avenue streetscape design, I wanted to bring note on this slide specifically because it's not, while it's transformative and it's going to, bring these areas of the city new life. I also wanted to know, the council to know and the community to know that within these designs there are traffic calming elements. So as we go through this presentation, to keep in mind that beyond the traffic calming line item, there are additional traffic calming measures within these streetscape projects, roundabout projects. Okay. Just a quick note before we move on. Thank you, Chris, for not moving. So in addition, and what's not seen here today, is we did receive a $19 million grant from the federal government for the North Main Street streetscape project, which we are working on design right now in project development. So that, on top of this, is doubles the subtotal that you see there today. Next slide, please. All right, so the city has one of the most robust school construction programs in the state. And I'm really proud to be the asset class lead for it. I'm proud to be the building committee chairman, and we, the city, should be really proud of all the great things we're doing to get these spaces renovated and handed back over to the community. Next slide. All right, so The reason why we're here tonight is to present the fiscal year 2025 recommended capital improvement budget. So with that, I'm going to have Julian Freund go through the next couple slides. Next slide, Chris. So that's good. CIP sources and uses, Julian?
Yes, this is really just a very simple exhibit that lays out what the sources of funding for the 25 capital budget will be, and then how those funds will be allocated. So you see that the first source listed is use of the current year general fund surplus. We're currently, or as of our last report to the MARB, projecting a surplus of just over $14 million. So the proposal here is to supplement the 25 capital budget with $6 million from that surplus. Then in the FY25 budget itself, the contribution that's budgeted for capital is $11.4 million. And then you'll also see that we have programmed in the use of LOCIP into the budget. This is a little different than in prior years, and it reflects a change in the LOCIP program management process that the state will be implementing going forward. Historically, this has been a reimbursement-based program whereby the city would, submit its proposed uses of LOCIP for approval by the state, and then implement the projects and be reimbursed later. Going forward, starting with actually this year's allocation for FY24, the city is going to be making just direct payments to the city. So we'll have the funds in hand and then report back to the state certifying that they've been used for eligible LOCIP purposes. So that gives us a total sources for the FY25 capital budget of just under $23 million. And then you'll see the uses set out there by category. So there's just under $9 million of new project authorization. And then the LOCIP funding, which will clearly be used on LOCIP eligible projects. And then the last item listed there is funding towards previously authorized projects. That's $8.4 million. And you'll recall that the city has been on a pay-as-you-go capital funding program for a number of years now. And the practice has been to authorize projects and authorize an up to expenditure amount. But then to fund those projects incrementally over time. So a project may, we may have a project that's authorized at $1 million in year one, but it may take several years of capital improvement budgets to actually fully fund that project. And so last year, so when we were developing the capital budget for this year, there was $19 million included for previously authorized projects. So it brought the city $19 million closer to having fully funded all of its prior authorizations. And at the same time, when we were going through this process last year, all of the new authorizations were fully funded. So heading into FY25, there's approximately $8.4 million of prior year authorizations that had not yet been funded. So this budget completes the funding of all prior authorizations, which means that next year, when we go through this process, the full capital budget will be able to go towards new authorizations, and we won't be looking back to fund prior projects that were authorized.
Okay.
I think that completes that
You did?
slide, yes.
Yeah, so,
And that also completes that slide.
yep. And one more slide, Chris. So Julian had just spoken to these 3 slides that Chris is scrolling through. Next slide, please. Okay.
I think we might have skipped over the school funding.
Okay, apologies. Go back one. And forward 2, please. Right, one more. Perfect. Is this the one?
Yes.
Okay.
So on one of the previous slides, you saw 6 school projects listed. In addition to that, there are 3 other approved school projects. They're McDonough Expeditionary, the Expeditionary Learning Academy at Moylan, and Parkville Community School. And we just wanted to point out here in this slide, if you take those 9 approved projects, we have total construction value of $736 million. The local share of those projects at 5% is roughly $36.8 million. And to date, so through fiscal year #24, the city has funded $18.8 million towards that local share. In addition to that, Public Act 23-205, so last year's legislative session, that act, or part of that act, one section, provided the city with $19.2 million. It was related to reimbursements for older school projects, but it authorized $19.2 million for the city to be used towards the local share of the 5 projects listed there. So Expeditionary Academy at Moylan, Parkville, McDonough, Bulkley High School, and the administrative facilities at Bulkley. So when we take those 2 pieces together, the $19 million from Public Act 23-205 and the funding that has already been appropriated by the city towards our local share, the 2 of those combined to have fully funded the 5% towards these 9 projects. It may require some reallocation among the projects of our local share, but it does cover that 5%. What the city would potentially have to generate cash for with these projects would be at the time of closeout, if there are ineligible costs, anything else that comes up during closeout. But the point here was just that we have funded the 5% for those 9 projects.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Next slide, please. And the summary table in POCD alignment. Next slide. So this is the summary table for this year's fiscal year submission. In facilities, we have 2 projects totaling $315,000. Infrastructure, 7 projects for $6.8 million. And transportation, 10 projects totaling $1.8 million, with a total for 19 projects at $8.97 million. Next slide, please. Okay, so we took these projects and we aligned them with the 5 action areas, and the 5 action areas are green, grow, live, move, and play. So green is to make a more sustainable environment. Grow is to make a more prosperous economy. Live is to need more equitable community. Move is to need more mobile transport, and play is we need a more vibrant culture. Next slide, please. So we took those projects and we put the monetary value on those particular POCD alignments. 1.9 for green, 5.7 for grow, 450,000 for live, and then 750 for move. This year, I wanted to make sure, and one of the major reasons why we did a fiscal year 24 updates with all the robust amount of parks projects we're doing, it's because this year, typically you would see play be quantified into some number, but this year we do not have any parks projects for fiscal year 25 submission due to the robust program we have in place. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, now the asset class project submissions. The next slide, please. Thank you, Chris. All right, so for facilities, fire station number 9, renovation, this is for design development, $250,000. I think I've distributed the the fire station renovation plan that CIP came up with to council about a month ago, so you should have that in your inboxes, but this is part of that plan. You know, the city working with Hartford Fire Department and finding out which station is in need, next in line for renovation, and station number 9 is the one that is in most need of renovation before the rest. So right now, we're going to go out to bid for engine 5. Next is going to be fire station number 9 on New Britain Avenue, and then we're going to do 16 on Blue Hills is the next one. Next slide, please. So 4 facilities with the, again, modest submission. We have the $250 for the Spotlight project that I just mentioned, and then we have program administration, which is the CIP administration salary. Next slide, grow. So flood control at $5.2 million. Next slide. And then if, the blue is the highlight of the submission, just so the eyes don't wander. And we have the ADA improvements. The reason why it's 200 is because we have remaining funds in place. So part of the process was to find out what we had to carry forward to be able to support these items, and then figured out what the value we needed to get us through till fiscal year 26. Drainage resiliency, 200, flood control. This will get us compliant to the SWIFT program that Director Chris Hayes had mentioned before this hearing for the DPW hearing. And then we have the fuel oil storage tanks. We have underground storage tanks that need to come out of the ground. They are beyond their useful life, and they are a risk to the city if we do not remove them, and to avoid the possibility of contaminated soils. A few other items. We have the Parkville drainage bump outs. This is last year we came before council, were approved for the money to design, and now we are ready to take that design and go out for bid so we can fix those areas of caution. They collect water. During the winter it freezes, and during the spring, summer, and fall it collects, and it stands there, which is not good. The next on is street poles and fixtures. We are trying hard to keep up with the amount of knockdowns that happen throughout the city. And this is a budget number to help us support buying new street poles and fixtures to replace the ones that get knocked down. We work with risk on the subrogation account, so if indeed there is insurance involved, we try to recoup that insurance to help support getting these street lights back up and running. And lastly, for infrastructure is the Burnham Street drainage culvert design at $200,000. In this asset class, equaling about $6.8 million. Next slide, please. Next, we have transportation. So what I did here, I didn't do a project spotlight. It's almost a program spotlight, and I did, and we'll find out in the next slide, is what this 1.3 is associated with. And I went and stated safety improvements because the projects that do add up to this sum are indeed safety projects. Next slide, please. Okay, so Arrowhead Public Space Redesign at $100,000. We have the Asylum Ave Road Diet, which I considered part of that safety spotlight project, and as well as the, excuse me, the bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements were part of that highlight project. Next, we have the Blue Hills and West End Slow Street implementation, as also part of that summation on the prior slide. Farmington Avenue streetscape, the roundabouts for New Britain and Newington, New Britain and White Street. Those are for design. Those will help, show our commitment to CROG and use the grant money to fund the construction. So this is for the design of those 2 roundabouts. Chris had mentioned, Director Hayes had mentioned earlier that we are working collaboratively with MDC, and they are supporting some of the cost to connect these 2 roundabouts, the drainage in between. So the relationship, I feel, is getting better between us and the MDC. And traffic control signals, we have about $125,000, and then an actual, just to make up the difference on a project that's in motion, state project there, 63,690 for a minimal amount of 29.4. Next slide, please. All right, so what's next? We'll go through questions and discussions today. Will be incorporated into the adopted budget. Provide follow-up answers to any questions we cannot answer today. The hope was I brought the subject matter experts in with me that we could be able to answer all the questions that may come my way. But if not, we certainly will, as years pass, we'll get back to in a timely manner. And then, continue to develop the policies and procedures to be better as we manage our CIP moving forward. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Director Dromey. We're gonna start with our first round of questions. On my right, do we have any takers here? Assistant Majority Leader Clark.
Director Drummy, thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to work with you and your team. I didn't know our architect was a part of your team, Julia Jack. No, you all have been phenomenal on the school building committee side, and thank you very much for your help on making our schools a beautiful place for our students to study. Just quickly, the PAYGO model, I think I asked the finance director this last week, and she told me this will be a better question for you.
Okay.
As you know, we adopted the PAYGO model for 8 years now. Is it, Councilman Gill? 8 years we've done PAYGO? So this is our 9th budget as PAYGO. How long do you see that being sustainable? Because it appears every budget year our list of projects increase, and obviously there are projects that are deferred. There's a hope for additional funding. So with this model that we have adopted, and we know why we adopted it, because we were for the bankruptcy, but how long can we continue on this model?
That's a powerful question, Councilman.
Remember what I told you during the break.
So I would have to do some real report. I would have to make sure I have the real thorough answer for you, Councilman. That's not something I could answer at this moment. I can tell you that you are right. We have designs that are shelved. They're on the shelf. We have full designs for streetscapes on the shelf. We have designs for traffic signals on the shelf. So we have designs to where I've had to tell our amazing engineers and architects and project managers that we need to really take a knee and drink some water, because let's start implementing and trying to afford what we have designed before we start designing anything else. So that is a fact. We are constrained with what we need and what we can do with the limits of PAYGO.
I appreciate that honesty, and you can take some time to think about it and get back to me. And the other question that I have is regarding capital projects. So big projects, they basically cannot be implemented with our current model because we don't have the finances to sustain that. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no, Councilman, because we are doing big projects with the support from the federal government and the state government. With their grant support, we are able to do really great projects like the North Main Street streetscape, Farmington Avenue streetscape, so large, and our schools for that matter, Councilman. So we are able to do great projects, but we are, again, we're constrained when it comes to those projects that aren't able to receive grant funding.
Okay. And since you brought that up, the North Main Street project, when is that set to begin?
So, thank you, Owen.
Good evening, Councilman.
Good evening.
We're currently working on pre-construction activities, so that includes completing the environmental assessment. Once that's done, we can start obtaining easements that are needed. We also have to reach a grant agreement with the Federal Highway Administration, who's funding the project. Our hope is to have all of that completed and to begin construction activities as soon as next year.
Next year?
That's right, but I could provide you with a more detailed project schedule.
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Majority Leader Rossetti.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you to your team. Mine is a quick question. In the budget book on 34-12, and you touched on it, the fuel oil storage tanks. Say that 5 times fast. When we get to year 2029, is it complete or is it just something that keeps going on?
So the short answer is the underground storage tanks will be out of the ground, Councilwoman.
Everything will be taken care of?
Everything will be situated to where we're in compliance, but there are operational costs that we need to mind and be mindful of in the future, even with the above-ground storage tanks, right? There's a shelf life to those, so, but the short answer is yes.
But the ones that we really will be then?
Yeah, the ones that can cause an environmental impact underground the risk will be behind us.
Okay. Thank you. That's my question, Mr. Chair.
Council President Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so very much for your hard work, and I'm totally happy with your new program. I've used it a couple of times. Somebody has called and asked me about the rec center on Tower Avenue. I was able to click on it and give an idea of when it was done, so it's a great thing. And using the GIS system with it too, it tells you exactly where the location for the construction. So if the council haven't tried it, it's a fantastic software program, which I've used a couple of times, so thank you for that.
Welcome.
It's a big help. So Mike, how many questions do I have? Oh, you're good? All righty. I'm not taking advantage, okay. How many schools have redesigned over the last, if you don't know, over the last 10 years? We have about, what, 30-something schools, buildings?
We do. So I can say that we, in my short-term understanding with what I'm involved with currently is, so going back to Weaver, Martin Luther King Junior Middle School, and then we have the 12 projects in motion, right? So 14 I can say with certainty, but I know even if you went a few years before Weaver, there's a few more.
You don't know how many?
I can give you, from what I remember, Global,
Okay, that's 17.
Thurman Milner, which is, used to be JMA,
Okay.
Capital Prep, Classical Magnet,
Wow.
HMTCA. So we've had,
So
we touched about every school.
So we basically, out of about 30-something school, we pretty much have redesigned, renovated, pretty much about all? 70% or 100, maybe all?
I wouldn't say all, Council President, but I'm fairly certain we're
Close. Well,
headed.
that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Agreed.
pretty awesome, to be very honest with you. So that's really good news. Thank you for making up the $19 million from the past CIP. That's impressive. So going forward now, it's really, new projects that's going to be coming online. Good, very good. Thank you for doing that. How do you choose the programs or the projects that are current and going in the future?
So, a great question. So we are asset class leads, and the city as a whole, the project managers, DPW, DDS, my office, we meet with the parks groups, for example. Julia does a great job and her team meeting with all the parks groups to see what their needs are. They typically have a plan in place that she's able to go off of and advise on what's next and correlate that with current funding sources and then program that money accordingly. And then the communication with the fire department, right? So we have a master plan, essentially, right? That we worked hard to develop that relationship with the fire department, understand what's next. So to me, we're quite organized on that affair, which is a large portion of our portfolio, right? I think number 2 behind our schools is the number of facilities by one entity, and that's the fire departments throughout the city. So to me, we have a great master plan for the for the fire department, and that was communication, right? So it's reaching out and listening to community members, the NRZs, right? Attending the NRZ meetings, making sure that they're informed of what's going on in their community, listening to them. They reach out to us, and we take their calls, we listen to their concerns. We perform, high-level opinions of probable cost on what they would like to implement. We try to support our community whenever asked.
Okay, thank you. Two other questions. The LoCIP funds, the eligibility projects, how do we figure that one out? How do you decide which one of the projects are eligible to use those funds? And also, our city facilities, like this building. Has anybody ever done a survey of all the city facilities to see, how do we bring these buildings up to the 21st century?
So we have a few studies in place. One is a mechanical, MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing assessment of all of our facilities. That was done in 2019 by CDM Smith, so we do have that on file. Granted, the prices associated with are not current and would not be able to go off of. And then we have several reports on this building, Council President, and there's money in place, Councilwoman Rossetti, to go out and find the assessment for the exterior of this beautiful building as well as the interior, and kind of come up with a master plan of how we can restore it to its beauty. Not that it's not gorgeous every day I come into work, but it does need work. So this year we've invested in the ceiling. As you can tell, there's no more water stains up on the ceiling. This is a brand new paint up above. Canvas ceiling, by the way. They did not know that until they got up there. And then we had another $200,000 on the skylight system that was leaking. We had several buckets that my performance manager and I would have to put up every rainstorm. So we were able to invest another $200,000 to stop the leaks. And then the perimeter masonry is having its issues, right? We started at the corner 2 years ago. We worked our way down toward the Burr Mall entrance. It's the next section, and we'll continue to try to stop the infiltration and protect this building until we can come up with a solid plan using that funding and seek grant money from historic funding sources and the like. Went on a little tangent there. So back to your question, I think we, Julia, Owen, Frank, myself, DPW, DDS, we're really trying to make sure we have all these plans in place so we can have half a chance on making sure that we have a solid plan going forward.
Okay, thank you. But, so do you do anything with any of the school buildings, not the actual schools themselves, but they do own a few other, structures? Are those under your portfolio also?
So the schools own other structures?
Like, for example, I think where their facilities are located.
That's under the building committee's portfolio. They did a little renovation, a roof, a few years before my time, Councilman Clark. But yes, we do mind their ancillary buildings as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Councilman Gill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Little disclaimer, my questions may actually implicate DPW as much as they implicate the CIP budgets. I'm glad DPW is still hanging around. I see, you have this line item for ADA improvements, 200,000. And then I see as it's extended out, it's 2 million next year and 2 million the year after and 2 million the year after. And I know that some of that funding came to us from the federal government, if I'm not mistaken. And what I observed is that we did a lot of what I'm going to call pretty needless construction. I can't speak to the entire city, but I can certainly speak to the ramps that were installed in my neighborhood. And they took existing corners where there already was a nice ramp so a wheelchair could go down, and they replaced them, and the only difference is they now have a rubber pad. And I think that's a great thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a great thing. But in the meantime, and these were done, mind you, at No Webster School. Both corners of No Webster School, the corner of Cone Street and Whitney, they were done at the corner of Tremont Street, they were done, and then they were done all over the city. But in that particular area, if you try to walk on the sidewalk from Farmington Avenue to that corner to get to No Webster School, on either side of that street, that sidewalk is absolutely destroyed. It's almost non-existent on the east side of the street. Right? When I say non-existent, there's soil and grass that's completely grown over large parts of the sidewalk there. On the west side of the street, the Webster side of the street, there are cracked pieces and you know. So my point is, it just seems silly to make a handicap ramp for somebody in a wheelchair who can't possibly get up that street. Again, maybe not your bailiwick, maybe not anybody's, but just so you hear my frustration as to why we can't figure out a way to redirect some of these dollars and to use them to actually solve real problems that we have. That's kind of a segue to some degree into what Councilman Clark was mentioning. When I talk about the sidewalks on Whitney Street, that's one block. But boy, I can bet you every single council member here can tell you that they know of sidewalks that are in horrible shape all throughout the city. We've got very old infrastructure, and in many cases, it's in, you know, those places where it's concrete, the concrete is totally, you know, deteriorated, where it's slate. We've got, you know, slate in pieces. We've got tar in places. We've got all kinds of things. It's probably exactly the kind of thing where you would come in and say, okay, we want a $20 million program where we go through and boom, we start replacing every sidewalk in the city of Hartford. I don't know what the price tag is. I don't know if that's something that you would work on or DPW would work on, but I just wanted to give you that feedback that I feel, and I, you know, I'm not just speaking personally, I hear this complaint from people all the time that, you know, our sidewalk infrastructure is in need of upgrading. And I certainly know that historically the homeowners have been responsible for it, but I think if we wait to try to enforce the homeowners to fixing these sidewalks, it's never going to get done. So don't, well, respond if you like.
So I wrote down the area that you just mentioned, Councilman, and I'll speak with DPW about their plan, because there is a plan that they're going to send to council on the sidewalks that they have to replace with the $1 million left over from fiscal year '23, and we'll see. But there's a lot more work that needs to be done than the $1.3 million in total, because we had $300,000 remaining to do sidewalks. So. And it goes back to Councilman Clark's bonding question, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And clearly, I'm not speaking about just sidewalks that the city owns. I'm speaking about the sidewalks that are in front of every single individual private property owners, because those are the ones that need to be replaced throughout the city at this point. Along the same lines, probably a far less of a dollar bill. But again, I think Councilman Clark actually had a resolution that called for something. I don't know where it went, but it's the street signage throughout the city of Hartford. I can't drive 6 blocks without noticing that, you know, Glendale Avenue's missing its street sign, Tremont Street's missing its street sign, Branford Street's missing one at this corner, something else missing one at this corner. You can't drive around the city and really see names on all of these streets. You know, sounds like a capital improvement project to me. Again, I don't know what the price tag is. As I said, I think Councilman Clark introduced this, which was sort of council's way of saying we would like it to be a priority. So, you know, I was fully supportive. I think it was unanimous on that one. So, just again, a little feedback. I think, you know, we'd like to see the city neatened up, tidied up, looking good. I don't know if this one will fit into that pay-as-you-go, but if we can't even think about, and I'm going to use that word, bonding, unless we know price tags on things. Councilman Clark.
Thank you, Councilman. If I may, Sir Chair. I did speak with Director Hayes when he first got in, and that's something that they're working on, and he had I want to call it a prototype, maybe a model on what it would look like, and I think they're still working on pricing, if I remember correctly. So I think that's an ongoing conversation that we're having to see what it will look like with brand-new street signs all across the city. And yes, so, thank you, Council President. There are only 2 people in the DPW's print shop now. There used to be 6 back in the day, all the way up to 15, 12. So we're down to 2. And so that's something that we need to look to address to make sure that infrastructure is sound.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councilman Clark. Thank you, Mr. Drummey.
Councilman, no, nobody on this side?
Sure.
Councilman Thomas.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the presentation. Sorry I was in a little late, but it's just really awesome to hear about the new projects and things happening in the city. And it's nice because, people ask me all the time, like, what's going on in the city? And this gives me some things that are happening. And, gives the idea of some of the great stuff going on. I just want to say I appreciate your team as well. I want to shout out Corey, who's, brought me in a few places here in the city hall. And
Cleans
showed
up
me the-
well, it should be
and-
said.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Corey
he cleans up so
well.
nice. He looks nice. But I just wanted to say I appreciate your team, Mr. Drummy, and it's awesome to see Ms. Jack as well, Mrs. Jack. And just, like your team and great presentation, and appreciate the work that you guys do. And I would love if we could organize some hard hat tours of some of these projects.
Of course.
For council, it would be nice and awesome time for us to get out and see some of this work happening. Right?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you, Councilman.
So I just have one question,
Sure.
because I'm already getting those looks. So my one question, well, the look of putting books away, kind of like we're ready. So here's my question. On the budget book on page 34-12, 34-13, especially -13, there is a portion there of the funding that it doesn't show the breakdown the way that the other portions do. When I add them up, it adds up to the $22 million, but there's that one $8.4 million that from prior authorizations that doesn't have a breakdown of how that funding will be used the same way that the other buckets were. Is there any particular reason for that?
Actually, the reason was because it's funding of all older projects. I just didn't want to mix in older authorizations with all of the new projects, but we can get you a list of the projects for which that kind of gets us to the finish line, if that's helpful. It was really just to kind of keep the pages cleaner.
Sure, that would be helpful. As you look at $22 million, 8.4, it's a big chunk of that 22.
Understood.
It would be good to know, to have kind of like an idea of, even if it was priorly authorized, to have an idea of what's going to happen this year, in addition to the new projects or the new authorizations. So that would be very helpful. I don't have any more questions. I don't think anybody else has any other questions. So with that said, do you have any? Oh, actually, I would like to congratulate you on actually bringing name tags. I think you kind of took it to the next level.
Hey,
I didn't want that I didn't want to leave without recognizing your extra effort in helping us know exactly who's at the table.
Councilman Hernandez, may I say one last closing comment? In future submissions, if we cannot have an ordinance in place you're not allowed to wear a vest, okay? No vests allowed. No vests allowed. Thank you, everyone.
No vest allowed.
Well, thank you. That concludes our meeting. Meeting is adjourned.